Hi, everyone, and welcome to another stream. Tonight, I am joined by someone who I have known for quite a while, but never actually spoken to until about 2 minutes ago. Elkhan Yusubov, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, thank you. Greetings, everyone. How are you, Greg?
I'm good. I'm good. You've just come off doing another session, haven't you? You were
Yes.
2 minutes ago. You tell us about that. What were you
Yeah,
doing?
that was one of the sessions that close to my heart, and I kind of can talk about them hours and hours. It's about Azure Bicep, and
Cool.
this time I was covering what were the latest features that happened in last 2 or 3 months, and what we expect in the next 2 3 months.
Oh,
I
nice.
know that there is, as there's Azure Bicep team has this monthly, community calls, and I saw you a couple times there. I saw your name and stuff. So, so I was just covering that for the everybody and showing some short demos on the Visual Studio Code. But
Ah,
it was pretty well. I mean, there were, of course, I didn't have like hundreds and hundreds people here in the
what
Friday,
about that?
evening, right?
Yeah, no.
UK time, and it's like afternoon here at East Coast. But there were like a couple people who were interested. I got some questions that I
Cool.
gladly addressed, so it was pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll cover some of that in a minute. Before we go any further, Elkan, do a little introduction of yourself so the people who don't know who you are can know a bit
sure.
about what.
Yeah. Hi, Mert. So Mert is. Uh, so who I am? I'm
Mhm.
Elhan. I'm a cloud marathoner. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer since 2007, which makes me a bit old. So it's like 16 plus years now
Well,
doing some training. But I love doing that. And I'm MVP, and I've been rewarded this year again. And I'm very glad and honored to be
congrats.
part of this great community.
Yep.
On my day job, what I do, I manage the team of cloud engineers and cloud architects here at TRX Solutions, located here in DC, Washington DC area. And I'm overall, I came from actually. I think our backgrounds are close to each other because I also
Oh,
came from
let's talk about that then.
software
Yeah.
development. I came from
Ah,
software development,
didn't know
then
that.
progressed toward getting the tech lead, being more technically responsible, and then currently managing the team of great engineers here at the
Cool.
company. Yeah,
How do you find being a manager? Do you enjoy that? Or
it's uh, in the beginning it was a bit kind of strange feeling,
Mhm.
right? So it because it's more of a people skill, but I try to not to be a typical manager that you see in the comedies like Office. Where you have the PM and others. So I try to be a bit different manager, be more inspiring and enabling people to do their best. So I hope it's working well so far. There was no complaints, but I made transition just to be pure, technical expert. If there's, if there's a demand for that, but because, yeah, being a manager is very responsible thing. You
Mhm.
can either kill somebody's career or you can, take them to the
Yeah,
next
that's a
level.
good
That's
point.
why it's very, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think my personal feeling is there's two types of manager. There's either a manager who is good with people, so I call them a people manager,
Hmm.
or there's managers who are good with process and
Yeah.
kind of this is how you do things. And very rarely do you get people who are both. Now, if you get people who are both, that's a win-win in my book. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I like to think I'm a people manager, but I'm not that great at process. So yeah, I was a
Yeah.
manager in my
Yeah.
last role. Yeah, cool. Are you enjoying managing?
Yes, it's been good. So I try to recognize, every team member on their milestone achievements, making
Mhm.
sure that, team is aware about, when anybody goes a little bit, above and beyond. I try to recognize that as a
Oh,
manager,
brilliant.
and sometimes I try to, make sure that they don't get everything on their plate, meaning that they have time for they to live their life as well. I
Yeah.
encourage them to take time off so that they don't feel burned out because over time that's something that we all feel being burned
Mhm.
out, right? And you know try to be just first to be a human and second be a manager, right? Because then you can have some success. Otherwise, if you are manager first, then people will run away from you, and it would be hard to motivate them when the hard times are there, right? Where you
Yeah.
have to make deployment happen, right? And it involves some extra hours. If you don't have that personal connection and kind of belonging, then it's, in this world where most people working online and my team is everybody's online. I don't see them in the office.
Right.
It would be hard to manage them.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. No, good point. So I wanted to talk to you about a few things, and you wanted to talk to me about a few things. So we'll cover infrastructure as code. We'll cover Bicep.
Hmm.
We'll talk about Cloud Marathoner blog and the Cloud
Yes.
Luncheon Man. But just to start off, tell me a bit about your career, because you said your career is very similar to mine. Tell us
Yeah.
about how you got started in IT and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. Let's start way from the beginning, right? From first time when you see and touch the PC computer. All right. So
Brilliant.
that happened when I was in kind of starting the middle school. Here at that time it was a Soviet Union time, meaning that it was still there,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time our school didn't have any computers, and there was after this collapse of Soviet Union, we got a batch of computers X 286 IBMs from there was some program that came from the US at that time, US 8, I believe that was part of it. And believe it or not, our teacher at that time, it's called, we didn't have, of course, programming. We had the class called informatics,
Mm-hmm.
and we were lucky that in middle school, usually it was given just to the high schoolers, but we were kind of specialized group of students have been selected for because of I like to learn and read. Long story short, what happened? Our teacher didn't know how to manage those IBM 286, and he invited some students from the university who were, a little bit knowledgeable in that,
Uh-huh.
who came with floppy disks. They loaded this MS-DOS. Yeah, there was no hard drive. It was 8 MB RAM at that time. So we
Well,
bought our own Maxwell floppy disks. Then we copied that, to get the
mm-hmm.
MS-DOS and everything there. And the first thing that we did was running the Basic, Microsoft
Yep.
Basics. Then it was
Mm-hmm.
Visual Basic later
Yep.
on, then Pascal, and that's how it started.
You've had a very similar career starting to me then. Very similar. So what's next after that then? What did you do after that?
After that, okay, great. So after that, of course, I hooked into computers. I liked it. So every time when there was, some, you know, opportunity to go to the lab and do the work, I was running there and doing. And of course, first you start with building the, mathematical calculations, right? How to run there on the basic. That's where you start. But then you get bored. You want to do the gaming, right? You want to
Yeah.
play the games and entertain. And at that time we sneaked up some games on the floppy disks, so we start to play some games there, which our teacher was not, of course, happy about. But yeah, that hooked me to the computers. That's how it started. Then later, after graduating, I went to the university to start the applied mathematics with computer science. Then, I had opportunity to go and do that abroad. I traveled to Sweden. I
Oh,
studied 2 years there for my computer science and risk management. And then actually I came and I also I was a visitor and plus doing some research in Wales
oh,
in 2024, yeah, for 18
oh,
months.
nice.
So I kind of visit the Cardiff, the stadium
Oh,
around, been kind of spent a few months, very few months in London for some
mhm.
work related stuff. But yeah, the Britain was, that was the first time when I traveled to Britain and kind of visited some places there. That was awesome. And of course, you cannot forget about the rain, but it was much pleasant than in Sweden you had more snow and more cold.
Mm.
And then it ended up that I went and got the work related, not the work related, but I got the invitation to work in United States. And then for the last more than 15 years, I've been in United States.
Ah, okay.
That's how it ended
Nice.
up. Yeah.
So you've been doing. Alan's already asking questions on Bicep. Maybe we'll just start talking about Bicep.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about how did you get started in Bicep? How long have you been doing Azure stuff? Did you do ARM templates before Bicep, that kind of thing? Give us a bit of background on
Oh,
that.
cool. So in terms of Azure, it started because I think part of the being well aware or a bit fortunate is that I have been doing some Microsoft's curriculum, official curriculum, and part of it was Azure, right? So I had this classic Azure way back, and there was some new curriculum coming. So as an MCT, my first exposure was with the classic Azure, where you had this Silverlight, uh, uh,
Oh yeah.
implementation. It on the portal. It was a bit clunky. Sometimes you get issues, so you have to refresh and stuff like that. But I started at that time, but it was more of a kind of not real development, but more of a experimental. uh, and then I think the really it started to click it in around 2016 when it came with another phase of the portal, which was more of a HTML5 oriented, more like it looks now. At that time, actually, here's the thing: my first exposure to Azure was actually based on the actual work need. And what it is, it's basically around, it was 2007, 17 at that time. So in our workplace, we had some demo to do. And I was working for highly regulated healthcare industry. And we have to kind of put a demo for the customer to see, if he liked the next version. But the issue was that, when we requested some, web service, which was IIS, to our IT team say, hey, we don't have any hardware left. Wait for the 3 more weeks. We'll request that, we'll install, and it's going to run there. That was the actual thing. And we say, no way, no, 3 weeks is too much. We in a week and a half, we have a demo for the customer. So at that point, I had my personal Azure subscription, and I say,
Mm-hmm.
let's use that one. Then we spinned up resources there, web app. There was like push notification. We're using that for mobile app as well. There was a mobile app development. So long story short, within like, I wouldn't say within seconds like other people are saying, because at that time I was not using the ARM templates, or there was no Bicep, right, to deploy to your infrastructure as a code. And most people didn't know about that. So it took me probably, half a day to uh, deploy the resources, some virtual machines, some managed sources, and then put our application there. And within like, a couple days, we had our demo environment ready. So that's was first time when I started to use Azure, Microsoft Azure, for real.
Nice. What about when you started using? So after that, did you start doing ARM templates
Uh-huh.
first?
So ARM templates, like when you do these Microsoft Certified Trainer courses, so ARM
Mm-hmm.
template was part of it,
Yep.
and I was mainly using that, like to show some how to provision certain resources in the class. And then what happened is that, I started to think more about that in terms of like how it can become more easier, because it was hard to understand. It was JSON representation. You have to actually spend a number of hours when something goes wrong to just figure out, what's going on with your ARM templates. It was easy to start, let's say, when you have your, and the way how I managed that at that time was actually provision manually your Azure resources, then export that into template, and then figure out,
Yeah.
what happened. That was my
Yeah.
way. It's not like you
Yep.
start from scratch with ARM
Mm-hmm.
templates and enjoy the the whole
Yeah.
process. That was not the thing.
Don't think anyone
Okay,
did that.
yes, that wasn't the thing. So that's why that was the approach, but it was clunky. There was some, for example, doing that way. Over time, I figure out what's the why. If you, and I believe that's the case now as well. If you provision a storage account from the portal and then export that storage account resource as an ARM template, and then just put change the prompts and try to deploy it, it will fail,
Yeah.
right? Because, and the reason for that is because there are some default values that has been inserted when you export that, which are not
Mhm.
required during the deployment. They go as a read only, and that's why there's a complex of issues where you need to know where to remove or reduce those code from your ARM templates to make it work if you want to use it. So there was a number of places like that, which I kind of learned while doing kind of
Yeah.
situation. But we have a question. You want to go to the
Yeah. We've got a
question?
couple of questions. Alan, we'll come back to yours in a wee second, but Mel's got a
Okay.
question. So how can I convince developers who have difficulty using JSON templates but don't want to switch to Bicep by saying they don't have time to learn anything new? Good
Uh,
question.
yes.
That's like, would you like to walk home 5 miles every day, or would you like to learn a bike and then like learn to ride a bike? So I think just going to save time in the long run. In fact, I'll let you answer this,
Yeah,
Elkan.
I
What do you?
think that's interesting question that it can come up. So usually I would say, to convince that developer, you may say that, hey, if you get stuck with ARM templates, do you want to spend your weekend and do you want to spend your whole Friday trying to understand what's going on in that template and why it's
Yeah,
not working? Or you want to use more up-to-date, more innovative new Azure Bicep code and feature that will save you a ton of time and it will make it fun to develop. Yeah, in the beginning you would spend a couple hours to spin it up, but there's a lot of snippets. There's a lot of help on building that with using the autocomplete, right? The Bicep extension is awesome there, and there is a big community of help with the latest information that he can use. So I would say, if you are okay to deal with production situation where you have a gun on your head to fix stuff on Friday evening and you want to stay all the weekend fixing that because that's your responsibility, then don't learn it.
yeah. I mean, for me, it's quality of life. Like, I
Yeah,
didn't really want to learn anything new either, but the fact that I've learned the bicep, it's so much easier to do. It's faster to do everything. Like, I would not want to. It's a bit like the thing I was saying. Would you walk home every day 5 miles, or would you learn to ride a bike and then you can use a bike to get home and do things a lot quicker and spend more time doing fun stuff?
yeah,
So I think, Matt, you can tell your staff or your guys, or developers, sorry, you can spend more time doing fun stuff than working with JSON templates. I don't think anyone wants to work with JSON templates.
yeah,
I would go out of your way to try and convince them that they're going to have a better quality of life doing Bicep. To be honest with you, it was very similar when TypeScript came out. Everybody's like, "I'm a JavaScript dev. Why do I want to do it?" Nobody bitches about that anymore now. They're all like,
yeah.
everyone does TypeScript. No one likes JavaScript nowadays. So
Yes.
I would highly recommend you spend the time. So leading on from that question, there's another good question here from Alan. Alan wants to know, what tips do you have, Elkan, for writing and debugging my bicep modules from scratch?
Starting from scratch is always a bit tricky.
Mm,
I would say, but then the best thing is to, I would say, uh, one of the best tips is to look how the Microsoft Azure Bicep team actually create their templates and their code, because you can use them as an example on your work when you are getting
yeah,
started, right? So it's kind of a no-brainer. Just look how the pros are doing that. But in terms of debugging the Bicep modules, here's the tricky part though, right? So if you're, for some reason, you are getting in some issues in your Bicep modules, usually it happens, one of the ways is during the compile time into the ARM templates, probably there is some issue. It can be that, the feature that you are using maybe it's still experimental, so you just, faced a bug in the, in that feature, so that's why you are seeing it. Or it might be that, some other things that you have to, if you have your ARM template actually built from your Bicep code and you are still getting issues in deploying that, then you have to debug it. And at that point, I believe you have to look at end result, which is your ARM template, and try to figure out, what's wrong there. And for that thing, Alan, I hope you had the chance to install also the ARM template extensions on your Visual Studio Code. Sometimes they are very helpful just to, hopefully it's not going to be a syntax issue that's created by Bicep decompile, but if it's a syntax issue, you would find it and you can catch it right away. And plus, I'll just use, my way is just to use the Visual Studio Code with ARM template extensions to figure out what's wrong in the syntax first. And then if it's everything is fine, you can also, next thing you want to try is to look at the permissions, maybe the resource type that you are deploying into your Azure region subscription, you don't have a permission for that specific resource. Sometimes it's a, but this is simple one. Sometimes it might be that resource that you are deploying is not registered on your subscription, right, through the provider. You can check that one as well, but usually you get some notice about that. And yeah, that's what come to my mind. But overall, it's step-by-step process. You just eliminate all the obvious, I would say, things that can go wrong. And then here's the thing though, if it doesn't work, you can also go to GitHub, Bicep GitHub, and open an issue, right?
yeah.
So
I'm
there's
gonna,
a
I'm gonna,
discussion there as well. You can use that
yeah, I'm
one.
gonna, share my screen a wee second and show you a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see my screen all right?
Yes, I can see it now.
Yes, I can see it now.
So there's a couple of things, Alan. If you go in here, there's snippets as well. So there's a lot of people don't know this, but you can do RES.
Yes, res
Like if I want to do a
dash.
storage account, I can do res-store. Oops.
Mm-hmm.
Can't type.
And you can
then just
also
tab.
type the name of the resource, it will come up.
Yeah, so you can kind of do like you can kind of get like code snippets and then just do location string. So there's I can't even type. I don't even know why I'm trying to type.
No,
It's
location.
yeah, so you can do that kind of thing. There's also what's the other one you can do? I mean, there's IntelliSense coming up as well. If I just type resource and then just type storage, I've also got like
You just right click there. It will
yeah. So I've got like IntelliSense coming up because I've got CodePilot installed. But if you don't have CodePilot installed, you can also get IntelliSense while you're typing. You can just do resource storage account and stuff like that. The one thing when you're debugging and it goes wrong, a lot of people don't realize this, but see when you try and deploy it and it doesn't work, you can go into the subscription that you're trying to deploy. You can go to deployments and you can see why it failed.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that, but you can click on like error details and it'll tell you roughly what went wrong. I don't know if you've seen that, but so he's also asked how do you decide which API to use and what properties to set.
And another thing is that, Greg, that were good tips. I would also, if you kind of try to debug that for 30 minutes or so, and you still don't see the light at the end of tunnel, I would just take the error from that deployment, the code, and put that into the as an issue into the GitHub Azure Bicep. Because the people from Azure Bicep team, and sometimes I'm also checking that they can show you the some guidance how you can troubleshoot that.
Alan's also asking, how do you decide which API to use? I don't. I just use whatever comes up. To be honest, I don't think you can type it, but I tend to use the latest.
Yes, but here's the thing, Alan. Sometimes, if you are using a Bicep code that's already developed, and let's say the API versions there are not the latest, but you know that they have been used with other resources, you can still continue using them if there's no issue. Because sometimes when you have different versions, it may cause some issues. Because with the newer version, you can get some new features that will work on some snippets, but are not going to work on your previous resource declarations.
Yeah. You're also asking what properties to set. If you the link I sent before, I always use the kernel ones, and then there it'll tell you which ones are required and which ones are not required. So obviously you have to do the ones that are required, but it's basically what would you fill out in the portal is normally what I fill out in the resources. And the more you do this, the more you get used to knowing which ones to fill in. I think that's hopefully that answers that question. But just through experience, I know the first time you do it, you're like, what do I fill in? Looking at this screen, it's difficult. But if I was using the Carmel resources, let me just show you these real quick.
Yeah, the resource modules are a good one.
Yeah, I always use these, to be honest with you. So if I do GitHub, let's just go in here real quick. We use these at work constantly. I mean, non-stop. So the other thing you're asking about which resources do you use? Let's say we're going to deploy, I don't know, Databricks, something that you wouldn't normally deploy very often. If you go into it, it even has like if you scroll down, there's an example. But so here there is deployment examples. Now this is not a great example because there's only one. But here's like the common thing. So let's do something else actually. Let's do like storage or something like that. Storage account.
Yeah.
So if we go into storage accounts and we scroll down a bit, there'll be different types of storage accounts. So there's lots of properties. So here's the examples down here. So one's common. So a common one would look like this. So it gives you an idea of what you need to fill in. There's another example where it's like using a minimum one. So here's like the minimum version. So you could fill out that just to create a storage account. There's one if you want encryption. There's one for V1, which is a V1 type storage account. So I would start with that. Go to these kind of examples and figure out common. Common sounds like a good one. So these are the kind of properties that I would fill out. But again, the more you do this, the more you'll realize what you need to fill in. I think it's just an experience thing, to be honest with you. You just need to play with it a little bit and get used to it.
Yeah, I would just say another one, also probably I mentioned that if you can't find any examples, one way to do that is just to go and deploy that from the Azure portal, then
Deploy the
extract the
resource.
ARM template. Yeah, extract the ARM template, look
Yes.
into that, and you can take that ARM
Let's do that
template
one.
and convert into Bicep as well. It will be auto completion.
Yeah, let's do that. So if I
Yeah.
just to show what Elkhan's talking about there, if I go into this existing resources, let's take a storage account here, right? Storage account here. I can click on that. Now I've manually deployed this. I haven't used Bicep. So then I can scroll down and go export template. Okay, so once that's loaded, I'll click on that.
Yeah.
So now if you've got the Bicep add-on, I can then grab this code once it loads. It's going to take a couple of minutes and just paste it straight into Visual Studio Code, and it will generate the Bicep for me. Now, the naming isn't great, and it's all kind of hard-coded, but it's a really good starting point. So let's just grab this. So I just grab all this, right, and then copy that, and then go back to here. Let's get rid of what I had. Oops. And if I just paste that, watch this, it'll transform it in a couple of seconds into...
Yeah, you need just to change the name of the file, to .json.
The naming, it's kind of a little bit hard-coded and stuff like that, but, you know, there's the Bicep for that storage account, and I didn't have to change it. Bicep, sorry, the JSON copied into
during the, it's compiled during the paste, okay.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I would want to change some of these namings and parameters because some of it's semi-hard-coded. Like I would create these as parameters up the top and change them. Like I wouldn't keep 7 as a hard-coded value in case I wanted to pass that and then change it. But hopefully that gives you a wee bit of an idea on doing that. Now, the other thing you can do is this. There's a really good website here, which is it web? I can never remember what this one is. Yeah, here. It's a Bicep playground, and you can take the architecture center examples and grab them, and I'll show you what I mean. This takes a couple of minutes to load, though. And the more you work with Bicep, the more things like this you'll come across, to be honest.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing Bicep for, Elkhan? Because you've done a lot of stuff with it, haven't you?
It's actually not that long. It's around 2 years. Around 2 years, not more.
Okay.
So basically, the first one that I really started to work on was close to the version 0.3.
Okay.
Yeah, because then I say, okay, and it's interesting. Like my way of coming to Azure Bicep was from there's like AWS SDK.
Okay.
It feels like infrastructure as a code, and my colleague was doing that.
Oops.
So what I did, I just find infrastructure as a code in Azure, and it was Bicep at that time. It was very new, and I said, okay, let me give it a try. This is something. And because there wasn't much information, I started to blog about it, what I learned, and I believe that was part of the things which helped me in getting nomination for becoming MVP.
Oh, cool. Okay. So here we've got some templates, right? So if you're doing something with, I don't know, let's try SQL Server. I type SQL there. Here's like a flexible DB for MySQL, or let's do a SQL database, right? So again, it's going to take the ARM template and then basically show you the JSON. So this is another one. Here's the ARM template on the right for a database, and here's the Bicep for it. So I'll put that in the chat as well. There's loads of good resources for this kind of stuff. But anyway, I'll stop sharing my screen because I'm kind of doing what we're not doing. We'll talk to you about that. So how long have you been doing infrastructure as code for, Elkhan? Is it just Bicep or?
So I dabbed a little bit with Terraform.
Okay.
But then because I was mainly doing the Azure development, I transitioned to mostly to Bicep. But initially it was
Yeah.
Terraform.
Okay.
Before that, a little bit of ARM templates. Yeah, and a
Cool.
little experience with AWS SDK because we're experimenting something here at the company.
Elkan, your voice is echoing. Can you do me a wee favour and click on settings and then go to audio?
Mm-hmm. Let's do that. Audio. Okay, I'm there.
Yeah. Untick it and tick it again because it keeps doing this.
Test.
Yeah, I think it's
Let
okay.
me. It's okay
Metal
now.
tells. Yeah, I think so. Metal tells if it's not.
Okay.
Cool. So what other stuff have you been doing? You do a lot of blogging at cloudmarathoner.com, don't you?
Yes.
Tell me
So
about that. Where did
basically,
that name come from?
yeah, the Cloud Marathoner is something that it was started at 2019. At that time, and the reason for that was that the people were starting to learn, getting more excited about Azure at that time, Microsoft Azure, specifically because of this compliance things that you can use that on regulated industries like healthcare, government, and other ones. Uh, and at that point, I found that I was using. I don't know if you have used it. There's like Azure Fire Server, what's called like Fire API. No,
Don't think
so
so.
that's
No.
healthcare standard, data standards.
Okay.
And the company where I was working, they were actually, doing something similar, but it was not a Microsoft Fire Server. It was a,
Oh,
different
fire
one.
server.
Yeah,
Yes, I
Fire
have looked
Server.
at that actually. Yes.
FHIR,
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
HL7, HL7
Yes.
Fire. I should start from there, not the your camping fire, of course.
So you can use that for
Okay.
like bringing in images of eyes and brains and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
I've
yes,
heard of
yes.
that. That's I'd
FHIR, yeah.
love to do more of that. To be honest with you, that's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it says HL7. There's like different formats,
Mhm.
R4, R3, and stuff like that. So, and it says healthcare data and API standard, basically,
Yeah.
it's international. So at that time, Microsoft team was just developing that healthcare Fire server on Microsoft.
Mhm.
And the company where I was working at that time, they were in close partnership with Microsoft. And
Cool.
we started, using that first for our, and then implement that to our customers. At that point, they put instructions how to set it up and run that locally on your PC. But
Mhm.
when I read and do that, it was not intuitive, meaning that you would have to, in addition to what instructions that they put there, you would have to know something about OAuth, you would have to know something about authentication there, the
Mhm.
tokens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you just follow instructions, it just doesn't work. That's what it
You
is.
you see a lot of GitHub questions from me on that thing. I
Yeah.
found the exact same. I'm like, this just assumes knowledge that I
Yeah,
don't have.
correct. Yeah, it assumes some knowledge, as you say.
Mhm.
So I say, okay, let me blog about that. So I blogged about that and I put that on LinkedIn, and there was like overwhelming response. I mean, there was
Oh,
so
man.
many people liked it, find it helpful, and I say, man, it's a niche, it's a gap that where people need some information, and I can feel that. So I started to blog about that thing, and then of course, not just that, but with Azure Bicep, when initially I started to work with that because
Mhm.
it was in early stage and experimental, there was a lot of things that didn't work, but there were some workarounds how you can
Yeah.
make it work. So I started to blog about that workarounds on Azure Bicep, especially in the beginning. uh, it was about like some parameterization, let's say, and there's simple things. Let's say it's a new version that just get released, but there are some bug there. So if you use that new version of Bicep, the thing that have been working or the compilation will stop working because there's a bug. But if you just uninstall that and install the previous version, it will work as it was, right? So it's simple trick that if you are a software developer for a while, you know that, right? It's not like Azure Bicep skill. So that type of things. Now, how to bring the some of the experience knowledge uh, into the people who are just fresh and they're trying to learn about infrastructure as a code using the Bicep. So that's how it all started. And then I just trying to keep up to date with that, as you do, like joining some calls, community
Mhm.
calls, understanding what's going on. And I believe there was some more interaction when I saw you posted some issues on GitHub discussion, Azure Bicep GitHub discussion, maybe a year ago or so.
Yeah.
And because I already kind of went through the same pain points, I say, why not respond on that? And there was a blog post. I just put that there so that you can use as a help, and as well as the others, right? Others who are in the community. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I think doing Bicep's really good because there's lots of help. I do try and go to the community event that they have once a month, but I keep missing it. For some reason, I just keep missing it. And then I see the email saying, "Oh, he watched the recording," and I'm like, "Damn, I missed it." It's the kind of thing I keep missing. There's Josh saying hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Josh.
And
Yeah, so Bicep's really good. Really, what you were doing a talk just before you joined me about
yes.
Bicep new features. Tell us a little bit about the new ones that are coming because I think I know a couple of them, but I think you probably know more
Yeah.
than I do.
Let me actually, let me see, because I have a slide available,
Okay.
so I'll
Yeah.
just, show the slide and reuse the material that I have. So let me
Yeah.
share
Why
the
not?
screen. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it would be more kind of
Yeah, thanks for asking all the
easier.
questions, Mert, Alan, and Josh. Welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see you along. Yeah.
So I'm sharing the screen. Can you add that, please?
Yeah, let me add it. Sometimes it takes a wee minute or two
Yeah,
to
it will
launch
take some
that.
time to
Yeah, yeah.
bring it. Does it
So you
show?
were doing this for what, the Latin American? What was this you were doing a talk for?
The talk was on, yeah, it's called Gira Latam. So do you see I added my screen? So are you able to bring it?
Yeah, I've tried to add it, but it sometimes takes a couple of minutes. It's a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit slow
that's
sometimes.
fine. Let's wait for it. I'm
Yeah.
sharing the screen. So the
Mhm.
the talk was about what is new and upcoming on Azure Bicep till we get into version 1.0. That was
Okay.
the talk, and I tried to cover there. First in last 2 or 3 months, what were the new features and new updates that we get in Azure community, in Azure Bicep community, and how you can
Mhm.
use them. And then there was upcoming Bicep release features that I just took them from the latest community call that we had, I believe, a couple days ago. And what are the upcoming release features are one of them is private networking for deployment scripts. That's kind of one of the things that's coming up. Next biggest thing in my opinion is the Microsoft Graph provider, where you can use actually the power of Graph API
Uh-huh.
to create the application registration, permissions, and
Okay.
scopes, and all these things. That's going to be big in my opinion.
Mhm.
And of course, we have these dynamic type updates that's going on. That's going to be, became more mature. Currently,
Mhm.
it's again on the private preview experimental. Then, when you deal and you work between modules and you want to share your, not share, but reuse your code,
Yeah, yeah,
you want to pass, some stuff from one module to another. It's there's no way to do at this moment, right? You need to have
yeah. Mhm.
your parent bicep kind of code or file, where you can somehow manipulate that, but it's not intuitive. So they are working on that feature, passing the resources between modules, and then of course completing the private registry, because this Azure private registry is a big thing if you want to have this, compliant repository of code for the organizational needs, and you want to have some governance on top of it. So they are working on completing that feature. So that's what has been announced yet for the upcoming 2 or 3 months. That's are going to be the features that we would see on Azure
Okay.
Bicep. But did you try, by the way, Greg, did you try to use the deployment pane? That's kind of new UI that
Go.
you can use for. I can show that if you want, and I can
Yeah, go
share
for
it.
it. I mean, I just for some reason it doesn't want to add you. Can you try resharing your screen? Oh, there we
Yeah,
go.
let me stop
No,
and
no,
reshare.
no, it's come up now.
Stop camera. So let me do it again.
Slide
Settings.
eventually
No.
appears.
Yeah. Stop sharing. Present. Share the whole screen.
Mer,
Entire
don't worry, we'll
screen.
get to your questions. We've got a couple of
So
questions
let's
from
see
there.
now.
For some reason, it takes for a while. I'll give you a
Yeah,
shout when it comes on, but
yeah.
it's like just a white box at the
Yeah,
moment.
it should appear in few seconds.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, there's here we go.
Do you
Let me
see
add
it
it.
now? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Here
white.
we go. So let me show that pane thing, right? So first it's
Uh-huh.
experimental. You need to enable your experimental feature. But once you enable that, I will show a very simple example here. This is the deployment of a resource group. You can right click and say show deployment pane to the side,
Uh-huh.
this option here, and it will bring this GUI on the right side. So what it is basically, a different way of picking up the scope. It can be your
Oh.
subscription or, or tenant, depends what type of. Then you
Mhm.
can supply a parameter file yourself, or you can modify the parameters here. and then you can, validate your file by clicking on validate here. So it will tell you is there an issue or not. But for example, I have some linter rules here. If I enable them, basically, uncomment and validate, it should fail.
Yeah, that's cool.
See, it failed, so it's actually working. So there's something that's making it work. And then, for example, you want to run your pre-flight validation to see would your deployment succeed or not. You can click on what if, and it will, go around that round trip against your Azure subscription and tell you, if it is good to run or not. Meaning
Oh,
that
that's
would it
cool. I
fail
didn't see that.
or
No,
not?
I hadn't seen that
Yeah,
before.
this is the deployment scope pane. You just need to, install the latest Bicep and enable experimental features. Do you want me to show everybody how to enable that?
Yeah, please. I was just going to ask that. Yeah,
Okay,
because
sure.
I think I'm missing out on some goodness that I don't have.
Sure. Yeah, to do that, you would need to go to the settings in Visual Studio and click on settings again, I believe. Is it this one? No, not this one. It's in to enable file extensions. No, adjust the extensions probably. Yeah. No, not this one. Sorry.
No, that's all
I
good.
need just give me a little. It should be, I believe, it's in settings. Yeah, here we go. So when you click on settings, I don't know why it didn't come up on the first, but on second try it came. So you just go to the settings on the Visual Studio Code and click on settings. That's where it is. Okay. Then you just come here, and here under the extensions, you will find the Bicep. You can also search here and you'll find the same thing. And then you just here, when you see there's if you scroll down, you would see deployment pane here.
Very cool.
Right, so that's what you need to enable once you install the latest on your machine, latest version of the Bicep, which is version 0.20 something. And then once you have it, you would get an option here on a right click. You would get an option to show the deployment pane.
No, I'll be using that. I'll be using that next week. Yes, very cool. Not seen that before.
Yeah, that's pretty much out of the oven, so to speak. Just freshly came out of that deployment that happened a few days ago from the Azure Bicep team.
Mert's got a couple of questions. So thanks for showing that. That's
and these are the upcoming Bicep release updates that we just talked about. Yeah.
Graph provider. Okay, interesting. Dynamic types. Okay. Pass resources between modules. Now that'd be interesting. Need to try that. That'd be private. So I had a play with the registry stuff before. It didn't work at all when I tried it.
Yes, I actually played with that because there was a need for it. And I also on a LinkedIn learning course, I'm speaking about that on the part 1, infrastructure as a code with Bicep, part 1. So what it is basically, let's say you have a big project in the company, but you want to reuse certain, and as a team, let's say you spend a lot of time to secure certain resources in, for example, you have a special Azure Storage account requirements, you put the parameters and everything, and you want to make sure that you version that resource, Azure resources, put them somewhere that's belong only to your company and only developers within the company using the company account, meaning that login can access those resources. Then you can version them and reuse across different projects which require well-defined, let's say, well-defined Azure resources that come with some compliance built into the declaration of those resources. So that's where you can use it. I think that's really something that most companies needs to think about, that if it is not just one person who is working on the on infrastructure as a code, but if you have a couple people, couple developers who are doing, it's also a good way of creating some assets, right? Creating some assets where you can reuse, and it's going to belong to the company because company paid for that time.
Yeah, we tried it before it's got as far as it got, and it didn't really work. There's a couple of things that were problems. One of the problems is how do you, which is a good discussion, how do you version it? If you take like the Caramel modules on the 4th of August, if they get updated tomorrow, do you go and update your private registry or do you leave it? That's kind of an interesting thing. And then you've got So imagine
Yeah,
you
and
did
I
a
have
project.
I have some, I think,
Yeah.
let me see if I have a
Mhm.
demo, not the demo, but where I already did that. So here, for example, for private registry, so I have this, I think I use this one first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, or it's not the first, let me see. So here in the repositories, I have already for Bicep modules web app. So I have like two versions. So for example, the first version, it may be lacking some of extra parameterization that's required.
Mhm.
Then you can actually implement those parameterization and add, for example, some locks on undelete and stuff like that, and put that in version 2.0. Of course, when you click on them, you wouldn't see actual code. It's going to be just the
Yeah. Yeah.
metadata. You
Yeah.
have to kind of put them through aliases retrieve in your Bicep code. That's how it works, but that's how it is. That's kind
Yeah.
of one example, but you can also, just to give you an idea, it's not just web app, right? So you can also put your, for example, if there's a special way how you want to define your network, and parameterize that, then you can create a bunch of resources here, like Bicep,
Mhm.
like it's here. You can create one for the Azure Container Registry, one for web app, another one for virtual network and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then of course, once you develop them and get into new version, you can always put there. And if one of the resources has a bug, right, let's say it has been deployed 2 weeks ago and it end up to be that one of them is buggy, you can create a new version and just reference that new version in your
Yeah.
code and redeploy, and then it's going to version control. Then you know what actually you deployed there, and it will save the time and a lot of headache in the long run.
Yeah. I would really like these to go into GitHub rather than a repository container registry. To be honest with
But
you.
no, GitHub is, yeah, I understand. So GitHub is great, and I'm not saying it's substituting GitHub. This
Yeah.
is more of a kind of the difference here, I believe, is if you want to have more granular, right? GitHub is something that where you put everything, right? The
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
solution. But if you want to have more granular kind of access and support toward the actual resources that are used, then you go with this,
Yeah.
so it's more granular. I would say that's the difference.
The one thing I'd like is knowing if someone's created a new version. Obviously, the person creating the new version can let everybody know, but it'd be nice to be able to go into the code and press Alt Tab and go, "There's a new version of this." But
Mhm.
that's just
Yes. So, but here's the
my
thing,
option.
when you put that there, and you want to use the certain version of resource, Visual Studio Code behind the scene is going to actually download that, whole
Mhm.
file from the repository,
That's pretty
from
cool.
the private registry, Azure Container Registry, and you'd be able to click on it and see what's there.
Yeah.
But you would have to have Visual Studio Code for that. So
Yeah.
it's more of a kind of different ways of versioning that.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course a bit more work that you have to put there, but if the compliance and project requires that, then that's going to be your answer for that
Yeah.
requirement.
It's worth doing. Definitely worth doing because we've noticed like the Karma models that we're using. If I go
Hmm.
back to my old projects, they've changed the layout and stuff like that, and we were using those modules while they were moving everything about, and it broke everything for a wee while, and then they fixed it again. But yeah, interesting stuff. Right,
Yeah,
let's go and answer some questions because there's
all
kind of
right.
stuff to stack up.
Let
So
me
Mert's
start.
asking, would you recommend using a parameter like new or existing for conditional deployments of the resources when running Bicep templates on pipelines?
Resource when running Bicep templates on pipelines. Good question.
He's also added a lot bit at the end to say what kind of problems can we encounter when we don't use it this way.
Okay, can we go to okay? What would you go? New or existing for
Would you
conditional?
recommend?
So
Would you,
conditional deployments, right? It's basically based on some type of condition. You have the logic, to do that deployment or not, or include the resource into your deployment pipeline or not. And I would say, yeah, if you have a different, and that's usually happens due to different environments where you want to
Mhm.
deploy your code, right? So I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, use one of the ways that I'm managing. I usually try to have a separate parameter file for different environments,
Yeah.
just to keep the things separate. It's kind of like single responsibility, right? You can of course put them all in one, but is it a good idea? It depends on your needs. On my
Mhm.
case, I try to separate things, And there's like this solid development principles if you are coming from software development. So one of them is single responsibility. So I want to make sure each parameter that's correspond to the certain environment is separate on its own, and I have
Yeah.
everything there. So that would be my approach. But if you want, or you have already code that's actually have all these parameters in one file where you have to kind of switch between the names of the environments, then you can use that one. But my approach personally is to have a separate files.
Yeah. And then Alan's got a comment. Alan's saying, existing is to refer to already created resources,
Yes,
usually
that's
external. Yeah.
So to come back to that question, yes. So for example, if you have a key vault resource, just to give you example, right?
Mhm.
And on existing key vault resource, you want to update certain, certain keys. It can be password, can be certificate. Then of course you have to use existing, so that you don't
Yeah.
recreate it. If you recreate that, then you have to reload all the keys that it had. So in
Yeah.
that case, yeah, you need to use existing. That will make your life easier for updates.
Yeah. And then Alan's saying, if you put the modules in Git, it's a big problem to update and maintain across multiple. Not really, can't really mention this too much, but there's a new thing coming out in GitHub that's going to change all this. Not going to say anymore, but they're working on something that's going to fix working with multiple repos. It's the NDA, so I'm not really going to say any more than that. So we'll keep going. Okay, so these are the new features that are coming out. I need to update my extension, definitely.
Yeah, and while you're updating your extension, another thing that you need to update for that, it might be your if you are using the Azure CLI,
Mm-hmm.
that version also needs to be updated, I believe.
Yeah, okay. I've got a
Yeah,
wee thing that pops up every time I run it to keep me
yeah. So
up to date.
I know
Yeah.
that I updated mine a couple days ago. From there, it's still fresh in my mind. Otherwise, I
Cool.
wouldn't know as well. Yeah.
I'll do that. Okay, keep the questions coming. If you've got other questions coming,
Yeah,
do
questions are cool.
yeah, questions are
So
cool. What's your least favorite? I'll start first. My least favorite things in Bicep are deploying front door and app gateway because they kind of rely on things being done in a certain order. And
yes,
if you try and script the whole thing, good luck. I've started just deploying front door as basic, and then I go in and manually create like the origins and all that. Same application gateway. I had a massive problem with app gateway where if I went in and clicked one thing, it worked, but Bicep it just would not work. And that's really annoying because spent quite a while on that with a couple of other Carl and a couple of other guys that used to work at Intercept. And painful.
yeah, yeah. I would say the painful thing from my experience so far was that, and probably Azure Bicep team is working on it, is dealing with management groups. When you are not deploying into subscription or resource group, but you are deploying into management group, and you want to manage your subscriptions from management group and as well as the tenant level, those type of things. There isn't much documentation about that. There are
Okay.
some, and the ones that are there, they are very simplistic, and they are not aligned well with your real world scenario that you want to
Okay.
accomplish for your customer. There I find a lot of a lot of improvements could be done, and I personally struggle a couple times. I have to kind of search for it, experiment with different things, and sometimes what you do is, if it doesn't work with infrastructure as a code, you have to implement some inline scripting. So just
Mm-hmm.
FYI, everyone, no, you can't do everything with Bicep code by
Yeah. Yeah.
declaring. Sometimes you have to run inline scripts. So keep that in,
Yeah.
on your
Definitely.
radar. So that was a helpful place where I just, for certain functionalities, I just used running the inline scripts
And
to do, yeah.
how do you normally deploy your Bicep? So at Intercept, what we do is we've got PowerShell that kind of decides what to do based on how you run the PowerShell. So, like if you're doing dev, prod, or whatever,
Hmm.
it obviously tags, changes the environment name that you pass in.
Yes.
So we do PowerShell into Bicep. Just one. I have one main deployment file and one main script. What do you do, Elkhan? Do you split it all up, or do you run it from DevOps or GitHub
Uh,
Actions? Or
so usually I preferred, you can run from Azure DevOps, but I use it. I'm not using it very frequently. I
Mhm.
usually use that from GitHub workflows.
Okay.
And in terms of parameterization and environments, kind of separating things, as I mentioned before, I try to have I started with single files in the beginning,
Yeah.
where you define your structure on a conditional kind of information of which environment is going to be picked up, and based on environment you pick up your other kind of variables and parameters, right,
Okay.
to be implemented. So that was which I did experiments, but for real world I find it for maintainability perspective, I find it better to use actually separate files, because for each environment. So because
Okay.
at that point you encapsulate, and here's the thing though, right, why you want to go that way. Part of it is actually compliance and security, because sometimes the people who are doing deployment into testing and development, or any other QA environments, they may not have the same privileges to do the
Yeah.
same for the staging or any other
Yeah.
higher level. So from that perspective, when you separate them into their own file and put the permissions,
That makes
then
sense.
then you kind of avoid an issue there.
Yeah. So
Otherwise,
we don't really do that because we normally deploy everything, so we don't need to do that. But what you said makes perfect sense. If you're working
yeah,
at a bank, you would need to do that. Yeah.
right. Any
Um,
regulated environment requires, like
yeah, totally.
healthcare, bank,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, because normally we just open up PowerShell and run it
right.
from our own machine or Visual Studio Terminal. Yeah, we do it from there. But yeah, it's interesting how I like the fact it's flexible. You can do AZCLI, you can do it with PowerShell, you can do it whatever
It's
way you want.
flexible, yeah, as you say.
Yeah,
It's
it's very flexible.
you can do like many ways. You can also, if you don't want to run your Azure CLI like on your computer, you can also use the Cloud Shell, right? Just
Hmm.
go there and do it
Yeah,
from there.
yeah, no,
Same as the
it's really
PowerShell.
good.
Yeah,
If anyone's struggling with Bicep, we could probably get you back on, and we could do some writing some Bicep and testing it and stuff like that. So Alan and Mert, if you're Josh as well, if you're looking for any kind of stuff like that, we can absolutely do that. My goal when I started streaming was to actually stream me doing stuff, but this became quite popular, so I'm interviewing lots of people, and then I'll probably get back to doing some stuff. So we could probably write some Bicep at some point, Elkhan. We'll jump on
yeah,
and
sure.
yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, we can do some Bicep things. Just
Mhm.
kind of help communities see what type of struggles they are going through, and
Yeah,
I look at them more of a good learning points, right? That we can grab as Microsoft MVPs and bring it to the attention of the
yeah,
product team, right? The Microsoft Azure Bicep team, saying that, hey, this is the where community find it most hard and struggling, and
hmm,
let's make it more approachable, more easier, so that the product itself get adopted well, and
yeah.
as the end users we get the benefit of using it more easier and
Totally.
achieving our goal, right? So
I
doing the
mean,
stuff.
when I start to struggle with Bicep, I deploy the thing manually, grab the
Hmm.
template, and then
Right.
start comparing what I've got and what. That's kind of how I go.
It
So
is.
sometimes it's hard. Like things like Databricks, deploying Databricks is really hard because the docs aren't very good for Databricks.
Hmm.
Especially when you start putting it in, it's got some sort of internal VNet thing, and it starts to get a bit like what's going on here. So just
Yes.
deploy it manually, and then grab the scripts from what we showed earlier.
Yeah, when you go into like a lot of virtualization related deployments,
Mhm.
it's not fun. There's a lot of things involved. And what I found is that even before doing your Bicep, let's say, you want to deploy a bit complex set of virtual machines that needs to be connected in certain way to the subnet and everything. Before deploying that, you need to really understand well relationship between individual Azure resources, right? How they are related to each other. And
Yeah.
there is no better way than deploying it manually, and then getting the script out of it and then looking at that, because that
Uh,
teaches you a lot of lessons which you may not know because you never did that before.
I think, to be honest, that's the hardest part of learning
It
Bicep
is.
because if you all of the documentation will say, here's how you deploy a storage account, here's how
Hmm.
you deploy SQL, and here's how you deploy a web app, but nothing really shows you how to go and say, right, I want a storage account and with a private endpoint to that web app to talk to SQL and
Yeah,
hook it all
that type
together.
of thing.
Like that's why
Yeah.
I really like Sam Cogan's real world stuff.
Yes,
Need
Sam
to do a
Kogan.
lot
Yeah.
more of that. If I had time, I would probably do more real world Bicep because there's a lot of stuff that when you start
Yeah.
hooking things up, it gets complicated.
Yeah, plus 100 for his examples. They are really good. And I would say that whenever you are doing something, try not to go the simplest way. Try to see how you can run that in a private network, and how you
Mhm.
can, uh, add more security on top of your solution, because that's what the real business would require from you.
Yeah. What I tend to do nowadays, we'll come to Josh's question in a minute. I'll go
Hmm.
on and go, right, I want to deploy a web app that talks to SQL. I'll find the docs I'll deploy it manually, leave it in a resource group, and then I'll go right. I'm going to retrofit that and grab the bicep, and then go from there, and just make sure
Yeah.
that it's the same. So Josh has got a question here. Josh is sitting here wanting to working out
Mm-hmm.
to figure out if I can enable KIDA on AKS during a deployment via bicep.
Yeah, so with Kida, I didn't touch it yet, so I'm going to be honest here. What I can just say about the AKS is that because AKS itself is not it's a beast, right? It's
Yeah.
not your regular kind of simple Azure resource that you can work with. For AKS, there is actually this public Azure private modules, and
Yeah.
some of them are supporting the AKS with a bit more configuration in them. I would say, just look at them to see if that's helpful for your situation.
Mhm.
But with Kada, I didn't try it, so I don't have an answer now.
Okay. If I was struggling with that, Josh, I would just. There's a guy in the team who writes bicep from New Zealand. His name's John something. I'll ping you his email. He's the guy who I always ping. Sorry if he's watching or watching this back and I'm giving you his email address, but I'll ping his
So
details. He's always the guy that I ask and he figures everything out.
is it the Azure Bicep team member, or which one
I
is
think
it?
so. Yeah, I think it is.
You are not talking about Luke, right? Luke Murray?
Don't think so. No,
No, it's
no,
not there. Yeah,
no.
he's another New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not him. No. Okay. Cool. Alan's also saying the samples are very simple. Yeah, this is my bugbear. So small rant
Mm-hmm.
here. When I used Octopus Deploy, they had a whole repo within their software. There was community contributions, right? And obviously somebody had to manage that. But to me, there should be community contribution GitHub repo that someone can just verify quite quickly that it does what it says on the tin, and you can add things to that. There isn't really that. I know you can still create your own GitHub and do that, but I'd really like to see, like when you go to Azure Bicep docs, that there's a link to some sort of repo that the community people can put in and just update and keep it living and breathing.
Yeah,
And it's
kind
really not
of
there
run.
for stuff like what Alan's saying, the stuff that's real world samples, because still my bugbear is real world samples, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's hard to find because here's the thing, to putting that real world examples usually requires considerable time, right? It's not
Yes, you
like
have to
easy
think
to
of the
do because
scenario.
even the people who are, in addition to scenario, it's like, when doing the real world scenario where you have, for example, a virtual network, you divide subnets, and then you have storage accounts that you secure with private link and stuff like that, because that's the real
Mhm.
scenario we are
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about, right?
yeah.
Yeah, then blocking certain ports and stuff like that. So it needs to be part of the solution. So
Mhm.
that type of things, in my understanding, it takes considerable time to think through, find the
Totally.
scenario, and then implement, and then go through all the hiccups in implementation, because it's
Yeah.
not going to work from this, from first straight shot. I'm pretty sure.
And
You will
that's
struggle. There was things is not going to work or click, but it's doable. But it's a lot
mhm.
of human
Yeah.
effort and things. So that's the reason probably why we don't see much of it.
Yeah, that's why it's not in the docs. But I still think the community could contribute stuff like that.
But community, yeah, like I know that for virtual desktop, right, AVD,
Yeah,
Azure Virtual Desktop, there are some good
there
examples
is.
there, so which
Yeah.
is kind of helpful. But if you talk about like overall kind of app solution which is
hmm
secure and everything, there isn't much. Yeah, there
No,
are
there's
very
not.
few.
There's
Yeah.
not. I would agree. Can't
Hmm.
believe it's 3 minutes past 8 already. We've spoke for a whole hour, and we need to get you back on and write some bicep. I think we
Okay.
need to write some. What we
All
should do
right.
is we should come up with some real world samples and just go from there.
Yeah, we can kind of come up with probably some scenario
Uh huh.
and then develop in a series of events, right? Because you can't just do it on in one shot. So you
No.
can have like part one, part two, part three, where you build
Yeah.
slowly something that's more real world and helpful.
Definitely. We should do that. We should absolutely do that. Maybe we should
Yeah.
put our heads together and come up with something like that.
All right.
Okay. Cool. Um.
Okay.
Elkhan, thank you very much for your time. I know you've been doing two sessions back to back, so I appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on and chatting.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Th- Thank you for invite, Greg. It's a
No, you're
pleasure
more
to
than
be here.
welcome. Yeah, no,
It's a
you're more than
pleasure to
welcome.
be here, and and all the people who are watching this, YouTube series, they are really helpful.
hmm
And I also watched a couple of them, and I find them helpful. I know that you have one with Freak, right?
Yes.
Also about bicep, so that one was also interesting because he's also, one of the front runners in Azure
Yeah.
Bicep community, kind of so to speak. So it's all I'm glad that you are doing that, and thank you for your time and everything that you put
Yeah,
into
no
this
problem.
show.
Just before you go, if you want to get in touch with Elkhan, there's his Twitter address. So if you want to
Yeah.
reach out to him there, I've also got, in fact, I was going to put all of them, but if you go to his Linktree, you'll get all these links. So that's probably
Yeah, you
just,
can get everything there.
yeah, and quite mention for your blog, which is let me just click on that. Cloudmarathon.com.
Yeah, Cloud Marathoner.
Which-
That's why I put part of my name as Cloud Marathoner. That's kind of part of identity what I'm doing here in the virtual world.
We didn't even get time to talk about Cloud Lunch and Learn, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, Cloud
Maybe
Lunch
we-
and Learn is like your
What?
weekly another set of sessions, right? So you can.
Uh-huh.
It's not just infrastructure as a code there. It's mostly cloud related technologies. And sometimes we have very famous speakers there,
Okay.
but usually we try to cover
You're a very
the
famous speaker. What are
topics.
you talking about? You're very
Say it again.
famous. You're very famous.
No, I'm not. I
Yes,
don't
you are.
think so. There are much more famous people here in the show.
Not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
So thanks for
Yeah.
coming on. Just before we go, thanks for all the comments and all the questions. Really appreciate it. On Monday, I'm joined by Scott McCormack, who is a very good friend, and he's also learning AZ700. So we'll probably ask him all networking questions just for a laugh. That's at 7 o'clock on Monday. I'm actually off on Monday, but I'll still remember to do that. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video.
Yeah, put
I'll
some
edit
like
it.
here.
Yeah,
The big likes
definitely.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
also big upvote for Cloud Lunch and Learn. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, thanks for
Cool.
all the comments. Elkhan, thanks very much. And I'll just play a wee outro video. Thanks, everyone.
Sure. Thank you,
Cheers.
Greg. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.